Documentaries are amazing tools to tell a story. How many have been glued to their screen as they see events unfold? But with reality TV's advent, some documentaries have made unique creative choices. Nettie Wild has set the stage for what a documentary can truly be. Not only creating provocative documentary films, but she has also shifted to art pieces, believing art can tell the complexities of stories.
My full name is Nettie Berry Canada Wild. You can blame my mother for that. I started out life as a documentary filmmaker making what some people called political feature documentaries, and I called them high stakes real life dramas. That took me to various different social movements and revolutions around the world, actually. I've kind of morphed into more abstract and cinematic form. So I'm working with installations right now. And one of them, which was the biggest, was when we spent 4 years filming the migration of Pacific salmon, and then we projected a 24-minute show onto the undercarriage and the legs of the Cambie Street Bridge in Vancouver.
Yeah, when I was looking on your website, I saw that, and it is so impressive. It's just so much fun.
It is. And it's still using, it is a form of documentary. None of those images, although they're highly manipulated, none of them started with CGI. They all started in the real world. And in that particular case, our real world was completely underwater. So that's me.
My question would be, why did you want to shift from documentary filmmaking to this more documentary art approach?
But let me say, first of all, I'm very, very proud of those original films. And I just found that the more controversial our times become, the more need there is. There's a bigger and bigger role for art to play. And the reason for that is that art can embrace complexity and replace rhetoric. And I think right now that there's a lot of finger wagging going on in so-called documentary filmmaking. And I hope I've never done that. But nonetheless, right now, there's a lot of people telling people what to think, and who are documentary filmmakers, a lot of films. And I don't know about you, but I go to sleep in those films. They make me conk out because there's no surprise, there's no complexity, or there's very little of it. And so I started to ask myself, I made a film in 2016 called Konolina, Our Land Beautiful. And we were way up north in the northern part of our province, dealing with a very vast wilderness, which I've had the very real pleasure of horseback riding over the years. And it's magnificent and on the cusp of real change because of very heavy industrialization. So I thought, what in the world can you, Nettie, as a Southern urban kind of armchair cowgirl, what in the world can you bring to this that's not, quite frankly, insulting to the people who live up there? And I thought, art. And then I thought, okay, what does that mean? And the answer came fairly quickly. It was to find the poetry in every single person who came in front of our lens. And poetry, the good stuff, has darkness as well as light. So it's not about making a puff piece. It's about really diving into those contradictions when they present themselves, but finding cinematic language and wonder to do so. And it was really interesting with that film when I started to ask the extraordinary cast of characters that ranged from diamond drillers working in the mining industry, linemen who were putting up these vast, extraordinary towers, First Nations elders who were hunting on the land, guide outfitters who were taking big game hunters out onto the land. Tall Tan First Nations people who were working as diamond drillers in the mining industry, and people who were protesting against it. When I asked everybody, what in the world, why are you doing this at this particular time here? They all had exactly the same starting point. They all said, because I love the bush. And I thought, okay, all right, so how about if we start there?
First connecting tissue of the story.
Of everybody is that they're there because of a real love of the land. And then that requires a curious camera, not a judgmental one. And so if we start there, then it's a matter of, finding, okay, how does this person move across that land? What does that person do? What is their, musical language? What is their cinematic language? What is their repeated action that I can film? And that film had very little dialogue in it. And then the same time we were filming Uninterrupted, which was the salmon piece, because that was a migration where the came around once a year over 4 years. And at the same time we're filming that. And I started to with the two projects, I started to build a vocabulary that was different. And in that particular piece, we're not filming any people. We're just filming fish. And the only voice you hear is Secwepemc elder Mary Thomas, who's speaking in her language. And she's telling a story about the salmon migration. And we just use it like music. It dips in and out of it. And that's it. There's the entire thing is underwater.
When looking at your works with Conaline and these salmon, I can really appreciate your artistic eye when you're looking at your shots or your objectives, because there are a lot of documentaries where it's just like, all right, let's tell the thing. This is a bad thing. Stop it. It's like, it's a story. Real life is a story. Real life is interesting. And it takes amazing creative people like yourself. When you're tackling a project, whether it's an art installation or a documentary, what is your favorite way to tell those stories?
I think each one of them demands a different way of moving through the world. You have to really, really listen. I mean, I can tell you what my process is, and that's basically,
yeah, okay, let's go with that.
It usually starts, a project doesn't start for me with a topic. It doesn't start with an interest in a political subject. It starts because I see an image and I can't get it out of my head. So for instance, we're working on a piece right now. It's a triptych. So 3 screens. And it focuses on fish again, ironically enough. This time the herring spawn. And it's called Go Fish. And it poses the question, if the herring set the table with the spawn, who comes to dinner? And of course, we've got sea lions and orcas and literally millions of birds. We also have the fishing fleet. And I'm not going to exclude them because they are politically incorrect. They are there. And the thing that hooked me into that project was that one day I was on the beach watching the herring run, which is a magnificent show it's a phenomenal show that goes on once a year. I saw this seine boat put out its net, and it puts it out in a circle, and then it purses the net. And as it pursed the net, brought the rope closer and closer, and that circle got smaller and smaller. It not only filled up with herring underneath here, it filled up with a boil of sea lions. Now, these sea lions are anywhere between 800 and 1,200 pounds, right?
They are big beasties.
And there were 100 of them in the net. And so what happened is this huge boil of sea lions are there. And what they've done is they don't even bother fishing before they hear the net going out. And then when it starts to burst, they hop over the net, they open up their big mouth, the net gets smaller and it shoves basically dinner down their throat. The fishermen go out of their minds because their catch is being eaten by the sea lions. In the old days, they would shoot them, and now they can't because they get shot by environmentalists. I looked at this and I thought, holy smokes, what would that look like from a drone? What would that look like if we treated the drone like a tripod in the sky and shot straight down? What a pattern we're seeing in terms of who comes to dinner. And it's not politically convenient, and it exists. And I got completely captivated by that. And out of that, together with my co-director on this, Scott Smith, we developed what is going to be, I think, a crazy triptych. Really amazing. Because if you could imagine, like some of the gill netter boats, they put out their lines in all these crazy patterns. And then when we bring them together in the triptych, we do this kind of crazy mirroring, and it turns into like a kaleidoscope effect. Gets very, very abstract, very, very beautiful, and very, very controversial. And I think, the point here is not just to be artsy fartsy. That the point is to pull a fisherman over here, somebody who's protesting against the fishery over here, and somebody over here that doesn't give a rat's ass about fish except for when they eat them over here. And you've pulled all of them into the show. Why? Because people, a friend perhaps, has been captured by the wonder of what you've created and pulled people, unlikely bed partners, together. And they may not share the dinner table with each other, but they will share that 25 minutes together. And then who knows?
Yeah, that moment.
Yeah, and who knows what happens afterwards. I hope that they bump into each other and that they are surprised that each other are there. And that's what I think art can do in these really controversial times, where I think the rhetoric right now, quite simply, is at such a roar, it's not helpful.
Politics and just controversial issues, social issues. It is so exhausting right now hearing, the debates going on, and it is hard to find clear ground and a path forward.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, this is not about creating art to avoid all of that, but rather, if we accept as a species, we are facing a huge paradigm shift that has got to happen. Well, it's going to happen. And it's how we deal with it is really key.
Humanity is such a force of nature, or I guess a force out of nature at times. Like even before our modern technology, during the early Neolithic period, we were causing entire species to go extinct, and that was just with spears and rocks.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's really interesting for me to ponder. If we are so busy screaming at each other that we cannot work together, we're really hoot. I mean, don't get me wrong. I have kind of written off the top 1% who are only into raping and pillaging the environment. It's like
right up there with you.
What can we do about them? But the majority of people are not those people. So
they're like victims of circumstance.
Pardon?
People often in these controversial situations are victims of circumstance.
That's right.
Like in terms of the factory farms and meat processing plants, these are usually migrants that are just trying to find a job. They're not the ones that are perpetuating the system. They're just trying to survive.
Yeah, and I think also there's really good minds at work that at some point we are all going to shift. It's just we hope it's not too late, right? And so that's, again, where I think cinematic art has a huge role to play. I think it's very, very infectious. It's very subversive.
That's a good one.
You can work when cinema is really, really at its best, it's at its most subversive. It combines image and sound, and it works on you in ways that, the audience has, no idea. And it's a wonderful playground for artists, because you're dealing with nuance, with light, with playing with cinema, the cinematic image, and with sound. And it's thrilling. It's absolutely thrilling at that level. And so that's kind of where I want to be.
There's so many elements that go into creating a piece that stands out. It can very easily flop. Just a couple weeks ago, or maybe it's a month or so, time is a weird concept, but there was a documentary on Netflix that came out by A24. It was, I think the title was Our Father, about a fertility doctor that ended up using his own samples for like hundreds and hundreds of people.
Wow.
And it's something that should be shocking, mind-blowing, and like, okay, well, how do we address these things and the situation of like, this is essentially rape. You're taking advantage of these women in a time when they're looking for help to have a family, have a child. The first 2/3 of the movie, the first two acts, were just so boring, which is like, this is the most insane story ever. Why is this boring?
It is interesting. I think that, documentary in my lifetime has taken a huge hit from what's referred to as factual programming. So, and what devolved into reality TV. And it was really hard to push back against that, because that's where the money was. That's where the fast food could be created to fill the enormous appetite of television. Thank God we've moved out of that, I think. But it has left its mark. And there are a lot of, I look at a lot of pieces today, and there's huge amount of work and passion has gone into this, and time. And sometimes people are risking their lives and all the rest of it. And they've created something that has come out of a cookie cutter of reality TV and the influences of that. And also the newsroom. I come from a journalist family, so I have a huge amount of time for journalistic deadlines, and I've had to meet a number of them myself. I think it's really worth asking, as a documentary filmmaker, what are you making that's different from the news? And if you don't know, then you're making the news. It's a lot of, just from like documentary reality TV, a lot of influences have come from the newsroom, where somebody is assigned a topic at 9:00 in the morning and they have it on air by 5:00 in the afternoon, which is a real art form in itself. And they have it in 1 to 2 minutes, and they stitch it together with voiceover, and they fill in the holes with B-roll. And that's where that horrible word comes from. In my movies, there is no B-roll. It's all A-roll. And this is, there are no cutters. There are editors. There are no shooters. There's a cinematographer. And, although this may sound like semantics, it's not. Words mean something.
There's the one where it's like, okay, we got to do this. This is your job. The other one where it's a passion, the art form of it.
Well, yeah. And also, all my films that were, on various different social movements and revolutions around the world, they were all scooped every single day I was out shooting by news crews who were meeting that 5:00 deadline. So the question becomes, okay, so what are you doing, Nettie? What's different? The difference is we would be following a story for a longer period of time. We would be editing it over a longer period of time, and you would be creating a piece that was, 90 minutes or 112 minutes. Why? Because you were storytelling with a real beginning, middle, and end, and you were providing something that had complexity and context that would perhaps, if you did your job well, provide context for future headlines. It's a very, very different way of storytelling. And one of the things that I'm so enjoying right now is that all of my films all of them, including A Rustling of Leaves, which was shot in 1986, 87, are still in distribution. They're being used, every single one of them. So for instance, All Hell's Breaking Loose in the Philippines again, and A Rustling of Leaves is enjoying a whole new life in the Philippines. And it's because it's lasted. And the reason it's lasted is all that time and complexity that went into the shoot, which was, I was 18 months in that country and up in the mountains with the guerrilla army. And we were another year in the editing room. It was a really complex story. And it stands. I think, for the reasons of time and craft. Yeah, and telling a cinematic story. It's not radio, not print.
Well, and clearly your efforts are being recognized, because out in Gimli, you're being awarded the 2022 Alda Award.
Uh-huh.
And I think you're the first documentary filmmaker to receive this honor.
Oh, great. Excellent.
So I guess, what was your reaction to, finding out about this, that you're being chosen and recognized?
I've never been to the Gimli Film Festival, but I really like what I hear about it. I really like the fabulously wacky filmmakers that started it. I really like the fact that it is, over the years, it's pushed to embrace filmmakers who are dealing with the cinematic art. So that was my first thing, was fantastic to be recognized by that crowd. That's excellent. And the other is, I was told that the selection jury had chosen me because of this move where I have worked with a more traditional form and have moved into the less traditional installation form, still embracing documentary images. And so I thought, what a wonderful thing. Yeah. So I'm pleased as punch.
And hopefully your works continue to inspire people to think about what they're creating. Because if you just take that little bit of time, you might be able to create something absolutely incredible.
I hope so.
So if someone is thinking about, like, I want to tell a story, or like, I found this person and I want to follow and see where their journey goes, they're wanting to get into creating a documentary for the first time, what advice would you give them for tackling that?
First of all, I would say to somebody who is getting started in documentary, is understand that documentary is a word that covers a vast world. So it goes everywhere from the news, as we've discussed, all the way to installations, art installations. And so the trick is that what kind of artist do you want to be? Do you want to be a journalist? Do you want to be somebody who follows the drama, the real life drama of stories, that in which case the big thing is not to avoid the contradictions, but rather go straight into them. Don't ever think, this is too complicated for people to understand. If you fall into that trap, you will then start making a dumbed down version, and then you're hooked.
It's all downhill from there.
It's all downhill, and everybody goes to sleep. Are you a person who would understand that no matter what you're doing in terms of documentary, whether you're leaning more towards the art installation than you are towards the feature-length documentary, understand that you're telling stories with moving images and sound. You're not making radio. And you have to go for the nut, the cinematic nut of your story. And that's why every image, every project I start with starts with being triggered by an image that I can't get out of my mind. So if you stay in that realm, you're making movies. If you get into just doing a lot of interviews, you're making news. And I think it's, of course, I'm grossly exaggerating here, but this is a short interview. And to make my point, I think it's those are very, very important things to remember. And I think one thing that I've learned is something which I call something that I seek is the repeated action of a character. All of us are creatures of habit. And the trick is that when you're following somebody who is a farrier, a horseshoer, then you film that person shoeing a horse, a whole string of horses, 17 different horses. Why? Because you're getting used to his repeated action. You're finding the cinematic poetry in as he slides his hand down that horse's hind leg and pulls that hoof up and reaches for that hammer and starts working with that animal. And you will move from the literal into the cinematic poetry of that person. And if you can nail that cinematic poetry of that person, that you're on to something. And so I think that's the biggest thing that I could say, because the form and the kind of form that you reach out to really depends on the person. And this person has changed. So right now, at 70 years old, I'm doing the most creative work of my life, and I'm loving it.
That's a lot of good food for thought. I really like that.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is work with, one of the things about any kind of filmmaking, but documentary filmmaking in particular, it's an incredibly collaborative art form. It can be. And if you can really find a cinematographer, an editor, those kind of people to work with as a team, it's not about giving away power. It's in fact about bringing three creative minds together and creating something that no one single person could reach. And it is, it's part of what makes me so very happy, I think, in terms
It's almost like an orchestra, like a symphony.
It's fantastic. Absolutely. And there are many, many other players as well. That's not including the sound designers and the sound recorders. And oh my God, it's exciting as heck. I'm very pleased to be leading these orchestras.
And for people, like, you don't have to start off with this big production. You can start off small. You can start with a small crew with just your handheld cell phone to tell a story, to find whether or not you're that journalist or the artist, making a movie or news. Like, you can find your aspect through these simple means, and through that you can grow and develop into something unique.
Absolutely. I mean, what they always say is the best stories are the ones right under your nose. That's what my dad taught me. and they are. And why? Because you know them, because there's a familiarity that you have with them. There's a nuance. And film what you know, but bring curiosity. That's the big thing. If you can bring a curious heart instead of a curious lens, instead of a judgmental heart, you're onto something. Otherwise, you're just going to bore the pants off everybody.
If you have any stories you'd like us to tell, or communities we should highlight, leave a comment on our social media or reach out to us on our website. I'm Ryan Funk. This was You Talk. And have yourself a good one.